choice. So for this one,
Dennis, just to inform the media, MORES is the Association of Research Surveyors. No? Yung MORES, so if you're accepted by MORES, no, you're accepted by PANA. PANA is the advertisers, national advertising agencies, no? PANA. So if you're accepted by PANA and MORES, it's like your methodologies and your reputation is acceptable to the entire industry. I just want to point that out. I used to be a director of PANA myself.
and going, yes, so we have a good trust with this company. So let's proceed with the first slide. So we look at the president first choice. We're looking at the per area. Now, Tamir gave some insights. I just want to point out maybe the first thing that they said. That 5 to 6 hours out of 10 respondents watch the presidential interview debate in Congress. And Mayor Pisco is the winner of the presidential debate for 43% of the respondents. He is followed instantly by Peter Repreno. So here we can see that Marcos has gone down from, they always say 60%, sometimes they gone down to 48%, and we are at 24%, and Lenny Robredo at 20%. Next slide. So here I want to show the second choice based on the first choice of the president. So if you look from the top going down, it shows that if your first choice is Marcos or Isko or Lenny, where would the votes go in case that person backs out? So if notice here, we want to point out that when the presidential candidate of choice is running, Isko Moreno Domagos is still the second choice, but almost 4 out of 10 Filipinos, followed by King Lacson and Bongbong Marcos. So if you can see here is that for Marcos voters, 45.59% of them choose Mayor Isko as their second choice. Okay, and to the next slide. Okay, so I want to show here the voter non-preference, or these are the hard rows. So for here, the question is, kung ngayon gaganapin ang eleksyon, sino sa mga susunod ang hindi mo iboboto bilang Pangulo? Now, we want to show here that Isko garnered actually the lowest voter non-preference among the field. Now, some insight that was shared by candidates that when asked who not to vote for president, about half of Filipinos won't vote for Lenny Robredo, followed distantly by Bongbong Marcos and Manny Pacquiao. Meanwhile, Isko Moreno Domagos enjoys the least number of voter non-preference. Non-preference for Robredo, according to them, is driven by Marcos preferers, while Robredo supporters influence non-preference for Marcos. To the next slide. Now,
May I just interject at that point? Probably the more apt explanation there is Isko Moreno is the least disliked among all the presidential candidates, and Lenny Robredo is the most disliked among all the presidential candidates. If you just to put that in simpler terms, okay, please proceed.
thank you. For the next slide, now we want to put our attention to the payment of 203 billion real estate tax. Now the question was asked, is gaano ka sumasang-ayon o hindi sumasang-ayon na magbayad si Bongbong Marcos ng estate tax na 203 billion mula sa kanyang minana kay Ferdinand Marcos. Now here, we want to point out, it's a bit complicated, but we want to point out into some of the things that might be of interest. Is that almost half of Filipinos believe that Bongbong Marcos should pay their family spending 203 estate tax. This agreement is driven by Metro Manila residents, older adults, and among the preferers of the Marcoso, Robredo, Ong, Pangilinan, and Soto. But we want to point out that if you look at numbers that actually prefer Marcos, that 33% actually agree that they should settle. So, kung sinasabi nila na walang paki yung yung voters nila, actually the data shows that 17% strongly agree and 15% somewhat agree, for a total of 23%. To the next slide. So here, we just want to show the bump chart trend because again, they've been doing this for a while now. I mean, since the start of the year. So at least here you can see that there's a downward trend for Marcos Jr. And for Mayor Isko, we are seeing him at least gaining more voters as time goes by. And we are neck and neck with Lenny Robredo. Uh, thank you.
We end our presentation, but we can go back to that if you have questions. Uh, Ernest, you have something?
Hello. Good morning po sa inyong lahat. Just like to point out, kasi I think there's been, I should say, hype about one chapter of one volunteer organization of the more than dozens, almost probably 50, 60 volunteer organizations that comprise the whole those who are helping Mayor Isko Moreno. So one chapter leaving was hyped to ang iba yung headline saying that I am Pilipinas left, no? The whole group. But in fact, I received messages a few days ago that some chapters will not go with their conveners. May nag-message sa akin from Rizal, may nag-message sa akin from Zambales, NCR, and other provinces, even in Mindanao, that they will not join yung iba nilang conveners if and when they decide to go to another camp. Aside from that, when Mayor Isko, he was in a 2-day swing in the Zamboanga Peninsula, he also gained some support from different organizations, such as some Basulta Isko Kami, headed by Engineer Abubakar, then United Sama Badjao Association Incorporated, or USBA, chaired by Panglima Adim Ati, and the Region 9 and BARM groups or chapters of the MRRD and ECC. So, contrary to what others are claiming na may mga umaalis, siguro sa bawat isang umaalis o dalawang umaalis, there are thousands that replace them, no? And that's evident when Mayor Isko went to Cebu. And also, let me just note that yung mga nasa Visayas also who's helping out Mayor Isko downplayed when Nick Malazarte left. No? Sabi nga nila, to use the term by one of the conveners of Visa, sabi nila good riddance. Because they haven't seen Mr. Malazarte for a time. And let me also point out, and I think Amba here already said it a few days ago. I also said it in an interview with Teleradyo. Kasi yung sinasabi nila Nick Malazarte that they wanna go because natatakot sila because of a Marcos return. Hindi naman po kasi yun ang overarching goal ng Isko Moreno campaign. Our goal is to help the Filipinos get out of this pandemic, the crisis that we are in. That's why we've been emphasizing that we need a crisis manager like Mayor Isko Moreno Dumagoso, who has proven that and done that in Manila. Hindi po ito usapin ng nanaman ng Marcos at Dilao. No? So bumabalik naman tayo dun sa binary na narrative. Hindi po ito yung tunay na usapin. Ang usapin dito, yung interes ng mamamayang Pilipino at hindi yung interes ng ibang grupo or ng isang pamilya o dalawang grupo lamang. Yun. Thank you po.
Yung sa briefing na, yung sa question and answer, limit nyo muna sa 1 major question, 1 follow-up question, and after nun, you can ask all the questions. Yeah.
Hello, good morning. Can we just ask why you think Daniel survey has different conclusions from the politicians. What would be making that different?
Yeah, Pulse Asia surveys are done through subcontractors. The field research is done by a subcontractor. Pulse Asia itself does not do the field research. They make the research design, which is the questionnaire, but the actual field work is done by a subcontractor. Okay, now number one. Number two, the one reason why online polls became more indicative was because during the pandemic, it was almost impossible to come up with face-to-face surveys because of the lockdowns and because of the quarantine restrictions. No? But that has continued to the present, no? And that may explain the difference. No? In previous interviews, I've said also that there is the element of distrust, no? When you do when you do face-to-face surveys. No? Maraming natatakot because of the prevalence of bashing by online trolls. No? Paid trolls who, halimbawa, bumoto ka kay BBM o kay Junior, titirahin ka naman nung Lenny Group or something, or vice versa. Masyadong ano. So, the possibility na hindi reliable yung sinasagot sa mga face-to-face surveys is well nigh possible. In fact, we have had reports of the subcontractor of the face-to-face the face-to-face subcontractors of research companies na binebend yung tanong in such a way na to elicit a desired answer. No? So that is why we have been using the online survey rather than the face-to-face survey. And ito ang lumalabas nga na data, no? It's not Vice President Robredo getting 20s in the 20s sa Pulse Asia, and we are getting 8 or something, no? But rather it's a real neck-to-neck fight between the two, no? Vis-a-vis the declining numbers, the slowly declining numbers of Ferdinand Marcos Jr.
Just a quick follow-up. So this contract, the report of the terms of the black who saying that they sometimes change the question. Are you saying this applies to Pulse Asia survey?
Well, yun ang ginagamit na field research o field numerator ng Pulse Asia. In fact, I think Ronald Holmes in the February data research admitted that they use a subcontractor to do the research. Ang problema mo pa dyan, yung subcontractor nagsasubcontract pa din. No? So for instance, I am the contractor rather of Pulse Asia or SWS or whoever. Pag may mga probinsya, lalo na yung mga island provinces na medyo malayo o medyo mahirap, sinasubcontract pa din yun. An example is, for instance, we found out that in Leyte, ang subcontractor was or the subcontractor that was utilized by this contractor, this field survey contractor, ang ginamit, mga empleyado ng isang city. City Hall employees. I won't mention the city in Leyte. So, natural, no? Kung City Hall employees of somebody who's favoring Junior, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., pwedeng na-islant. I'm not saying conclusively na na-islant, but the possibility of the questions being slanted or skewed towards a desired answer is well nigh possible.
For Daniel, because I read about the methodology, it seems they have a base of people who respond to their questionnaires, right? So,
Yeah, 659,000.
So how do they know they are not asking the same people?
No,
How do they know it's random?
they double check that, no, and these are done randomly. Hindi naman the same people. No? They have 659,600 respondents all over the country in all the regions, no? All the provinces, and then these are randomly selected
Every time they do a survey.
every time they do a survey.
So they know these are real people.
Yeah.
The
Yes,
people
these
who
are
know the
real
numbers.
people. They have the database on these people, their addresses, their cell phone numbers, etc. If you will take note, no, in the U.S. presidential elections since 2016, where Trump defeated Clinton, and then in 2020, when Trump was defeated by Biden, the results were very fast, no? And even in the key states, no, yung mga key states like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, overnight they had results, no? Because yung methodology is no longer face to face. Lalo na nung panahon na yon. Remember 2020 was the height of the pandemic in the US. So ang ginagamit was online surveys na. And the results were quite accurate in the sense na pati yung numbers na panalo ni Biden, for instance, in Pennsylvania vis-a-vis Trump were on the dot. No? The same thing in Georgia, I think. Georgia, Pennsylvania, and another state, Michigan. No? I was in ano kasi, that's why I noticed that myself. I was in quarantine at that time in Taiwan. So I had nothing to do except watch every hour, every ano, no, the CNN result, the CNN coverage of the election returns and the pre-election polls. And I noticed on the dot talaga, but all of these were done online.
Next question. Maris.
Sir, good morning. With regards to the report of subcontracting surveys, did you only learn about this now for this specific elections, or this has been done in previous elections already?
I think these were done in previous elections. No? But as far as I know, the company that is now being used for field research or for field work is a new company, no? From employees of previous companies which closed down or which have transferred business. So the problem here is if not necessarily the company, but the field researchers that are used have been influenced by a particular candidate with plenty of money. I'm not making an accusation right now. I'm just talking of possibilities.
If this has been the practice in the past, does it diminish the credibility of the survey?
No, in the past they were using some very reputable companies who did consumer research. I think TNS. In 2010, at least, we knew that TNS. I do not know if there's still in the market, but TNS was the one that was being used for field work by SWS. I don't know about us. At that time, in 2010, during the Pinoy. And I remember that we went directly to TNS with our own research questionnaires. Senator Osmeña and I went directly to TNS to ask them to give the questionnaire. We designed it ourselves. And TNS was giving us very accurate data. That's why we knew by April of 2010, I remember I briefed the family of the late President Pinoy Aquino, and I told them that one, we're definitely winning this election. Two, ERAP will win over Villar. ERAP will be number 2 and Villar will be number 3. The family didn't believe me at that time and said, no, it's still Villar, but I already saw from the data that it was going to be ERA as on second place, but the far second place from Bicol.
Sir, so right now, is it just Pulse, which is using subcontractors for their surveys, or other survey companies as well?
It is possible.
are using?
It's possible that others, but I do not. We haven't seen late SWS survey. No? What we've seen are commission surveys by strat base, if I'm not mistaken, of SWS. Pero yung non-commission, like the Ulat ng Bayan ng Pulse Asia, no? We haven't seen that from SWS of late.
So, but Tangere is not subcontracting. It's really going down on the field.
Yeah, I think they're partners with Manila Bulletin. They are partners of Manila Bulletin, and they briefed us on this at our request. They briefed us on these surveys that they've done.
And just for enlightenment, sir, how long has Tangere been used as a survey
It
means for
started
presidential
in
elections?
2018, and the founder, in fact, is a TOYM awardee, no, for statistical measures. They started in 2018, and they were doing basically consumer research. And it's only now that they started doing political research, or research on political candidacy.
In other words, what you're trying to say is that the methodology being used by Tangere is more credible than what others are using.
I'm not saying they're more credible. I'm just pointing out that they are quite credible, and they are more cost-effective actually than field, face-to-face surveys, especially at this time of the pandemic and the fallout of the pandemic.
Yes, sir. And vis-a-vis the things that you're seeing on the ground, for example, when you go out on campaign sorties, yung results po ba of the polls really reflect what you're seeing as compared to the Tangere, yung comparison lang po, the survey results?
What we're seeing from Pulse does not reflect what we're seeing on the ground. The ground reception. I think many of you have covered our field sorties, no? And you've seen the work. These are very organic. No? We do not bring people to our rallies. In fact, we do not have big rallies for that matter, because we do not consider that to be cost effective. I mean, it costs a lot of money, but the correlation between voting and presence in campaign rallies where you have big time entertainers, does not correlate on a one-on-one basis. So to us, the numbers here are more akin to what we're seeing on the ground than the 24 and 8, or whatever. 21 and 8 between Vice President Lenny and Mayor Isko.
PTP4.
Sir, kung pagpapasahin pa rin po itong Tangere, 48% si Bongbong Marcos, 24% si Mayor Isko. Medyo malayo pa rin po. And yung election po, 1 month na lang po, patingin pa natin habang papalapit ng election. Kung kaya natin pagpasahin natin, mas didikit pa rin po ba siya sa survey? And ano pa po yung dapat ninyong gawin po para pag tumakas pa yung numero ni Mayor Isko?
Well, una, when you talk of 48, the difference between 48 and 24, let's sound off the numbers, that's 24 points. So if you get 13 points additional for Mayor Isko, you defeat the 48. Now, you don't have to get 24 points, the difference. You get half of that, or more than half of that, and you win. So what we're saying is this is going to be a very, very close fight, assuming na walang aatras. No? Assuming na walang aatras, this is going to be very, very close. So it's up to Mayor Isko, no, to close that gap. Secondly, dyan na nga pumapasok yung issues, no? Because we've seen, for instance, that patingin mo yung bank chart. You see there that there has been a consistent decline from a high of 60, ano yan? 60 down to 48, no? From the January surveys. Ganon. So, but that does not necessarily mean that trend will follow na ganun lang, because at one point in time it could suddenly drop. No? This has happened in previous elections. Yung meron parang turning point, no? A turning point is reached and then there is a sudden drop and there is a sudden surge on the part of another candidate. Although the correlation is not exact. Note that if you look at those who responded that the family of Ferdinand Marcos Jr. should pay their estate tax, if you try to correlate that, cross-reference it, lumalabas, 1/3 of his support now is really quite soft. This is probably the 1/3 na dinala ni Sara Duterte sa kanya by being his vice presidential candidate. So if you try to get 33% or 1/3 or 48%, no, you can pwede mo ma-attract yung 33% or 48%. No? So that if you deduct that, you're talking of about 29% ang hardcore support ni Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Now, so it's up to the other candidates to try to bring that down to 29%. If you bring that down to 29%, you could increase your numbers to higher than 29% to be able to win this particular election.
Next question.
TV. Good morning po, sir. Sir, just want to clarify yung question din ni Marie. With regard to, because you compared initially yung methodology ng False Asia from Tangere, is it simply saying na mas accurate ang sa Tangere for this matter?
I don't want to make that assertion na definitely mas accurate ito kaysa sa dun sa False Asia. I'm just saying that from our point of view, no, and that is why we're quite confident about this kasi quick and turnaround. No? Kasi surveys are always a snapshot of a particular point in time. No? Pag ang survey mo, halimbawa, ginawa mo ng March, middle of March, are those numbers still accurate now? We're now talking April 8, no? Yung 3 weeks have passed. A lot of things happen in a campaign. It's a very dynamic setup. No? One particular issue can bring you down. I recall, for instance, no, that in the case of the 2016 run of Senator Grace Poe, she was hounded by the issue of the citizenship, questions on her, on whether she was qualified as a natural born citizen or not. Ano yun? That really took its toll. And even when the Supreme Court finally decided that she was qualified and she was to run, no? Hindi na bumalik. You know, yung ganun yun no? There are times na parang you get to a particular turning point ka, tuloy-tuloy ang nababa, hindi ka na makabawi. No? Ganun din yan. No? So there are so many elements that come into a presidential, lalo na presidential campaign, that changes people's minds quickly. No? And then yun na, hindi ka na makabawi.
Sir, my other question is, what do you think are the reasons for the switch of other supporters?
One, I think, the 203 billion estate tax issue, which Chairman Ernest and the campaign team, including Mayor Isko, has brought about or brought to the attention of the public, even if the initial study was done by retired Associate Justice Antonio Carpio. Hindi naman kami gumawa nun no? We read it and we agreed with it. Then we sent letters to BIR and to PCGG who agreed with, who conferred with our statements. No? So, ibig sabihin, and then even the President said, sisingilin niya. Secretary Dominguez said, sisingilin niya. So nagkaroon ng traction yun. No? That is one possibility. The other element here is yung refusal to be interviewed, refusal to join the class. Nakaka-turn off yun to a certain segment of his initial voting base. No? So yun yung nakikita natin ngayon. The other element that gusto ko lang i-follow through dito is, kasi right now, a lot of people are saying dapat mag-unite ang mga kandidatong kalaban ni Junior, no? Para matalo si Junior, no? What you see in the data here is yung boto ni Isko Moreno, no, hindi pupunta kay Vice President Lenny. Yung boto niya, kung umatras siya, pagsama, pupunta kay BBM, kay Marcos Jr. That the bulk of it goes that way, no? Ganun din yung kay Pacquiao, no? Ganun din yung kay Ping Lacson, no? Because as we pointed out in one of the charts, no, mukhang malakas ang non-preference for Vice President Lenny Robredo as against the preference for Mayor Isko. Yung list is like that.
To add sa sinabi ni Amba, no? So kung makikita niyo rito, same chart, no? If Len is the one who's going to withdraw, 51% of her supporters are going to Mayor Isko. So while kung naman si Mayor Isko ang panawagan nga nila is for him to withdraw, only 17% will go to Len. In fact, it will strengthen more the Marcos candidacy, as clear from this survey.
Next question, PTV5.
One, ignorance of the law does not excuse anyone. I mean, that the mere fact na umabot sila sa Supreme Court, at Court of Appeal sila, then Supreme Court, alam nila na buhay yung kaso. Pangalawa, the BIR has already certified that they sent notices. The last notice being December 2, 2021. So, paano naman hindi nila matatanggap? No? Obviously naman, may address sila, no? O kung pinadala by registered mail, that is considered received once there is a registered mail notice.
Follow-up question. Ian.
So are you saying, sirs, that if withdrawal yung strategy, in fact, the better withdrawal based on your data is not for Isko to withdraw, but for Lenny to withdraw, because Isko is able to capture more voters and is the least objectionable among them?
Yes, and he is the second choice preference of all other candidates, whether it is Bongbong or Ping or Pacquiao or even Lenny herself.
Are you making that call to me?
No. We cannot make that call. I'm just trying to explain na yung sinasabi na it's down to a two-way contest is absolutely false. It is a three-way contest.
I just noticed the date of the last time the same day as qualification came out. Was this coincidence or was it time to appear with false news?
No, April 6 was when they brought out their March survey, which was I think March 17 to 17.
So April 6 is when they conducted.
When they conducted it, kasi nga online mabilis. And they explained to us that the reason they did this was they wanted to test yung impact ng debate. The last debate, which was April 3, if I'm not mistaken. April 3 ba, Sunday?
But they decided to hold this on April 6. not because Pulse Asia was released on that day? I mean, they just
No,
want to get
no,
the...
no, no. They wanted to test kung ano ang impact ng debate. And you will notice that tumaas si Isko by 3 percentage points yata. To 2 percentage points after the debate. Pero yung kay Junior, statistical tayo naman yun, parang stable. In fact, if you look deeper at the data, 2/3 of those who voted or preferred Ferdinand Marcos Jr. did not even bother to watch the debate. Kung sana yun yung solid talaga, wala na silang pakialam. No matter what, they will vote for him. I mean, that of course is inference rather than fact. No? So yun yung lumalabas, si Isko Moreno did well during the debate, and that's why he had a 2% increase on the basis of, kasi difference March 31 and April 6. 1 week lang na difference.
Aside from the fact that Pulse Asia uses subcontractors, what makes you think a mobile survey is more accurate than a paper?
Not necessarily more accurate, no, aside from what I mentioned kanina, but it's more immediate ang results sa'yo. Kasi nga, the difference between March 17 and April 6 is about 3 weeks. Diba? So yung how fast or how dynamic the change in voter preferences are, especially during the latter part of a campaign, is very important to take note of. Mabilis ang palitan ng isip dyan. Yun yung alam namin latest. I do not know if other companies did a survey about the same.
Next question from Raya Kapula.
Hi sir, good morning. Sir, sorry, just clarification. Independent po itong group na ito, but whose initiative is this?
They do periodic surveys na kasi nga, I think they have a tie-up with Manila Bulletin. So I don't know when they're going to bring this out sa bulletin. We just found out that they had, and we asked that we be briefed. We be briefed. They gave us this briefing yesterday afternoon.
Okay. Sir, sinabi niyo po kanina, and even po sa mga past interview ni Yorme, sabi niya, ang tunay na labanan ay wala sa survey. So, ano po ngayon yung magiging, kumbaga nasa face-to-face yung pagpunta mismo doon sa lugar. At now, sir, ano po ngayon yung magiging relevance na nung survey?
Well, the relevance of this, of course, at the end of the day, lahat dinidesisyonan sa May 9, hindi naman ngayon. No? So what we're saying lang is, yung frame na parang insurmountable na yung numbers ni Ferdinand Marcos Jr. as in, wala na, tapos na eleksyon. I mean, you've read and seen so many commentators as well as columnists say, tapos na eleksyon, di ba? Panalo na si Marcos Jr. Or, the other contention being na dalawa na lang ang naglalaban, no? Is belied by the numbers here. And that's the same thing that we are seeing on the ground, on the field. Yun ding mga endorsements ng politicians, for instance. No? I just like to remind you, no, that Mayor Rodrigo Roa Duterte hardly had any politician endorsing him until 2 weeks before the election. No? I mean, nung nakita na nila na talagang meron ng surge. No? At the beginning, all we had were the politicians from Davao. Not nobody else was with Mayor Duterte nung umpisa. So, yung mga endorsement ng politicians, that they do not really matter as much. Because at the end of the day, it's the voter, in the secrecy of his of the precinct, who makes the decision.
Next question.
Sir, Lito, meaning to say, itong mga surveys na to is a mind conditioning po ba sa mga voters? Does this surveys dictates their decision making?
Well, it depends kasi on the maturity of the electorate. In more mature democracies, especially where you have a two-party system, which is why I keep hammering out the idiocy of this multi-party system in a presidential form of government. No? That, hindi talaga magkabagay no? In more mature democracies and with an electorate that is more shall we say, more mature, no? Hindi nako-condition yung mind ng mga surveys, no? Pero dito sa Pilipinas talaga, yung bandwagon effect, no? Especially created by an early bandwagon effect, no? Which is not normal in previous elections. Kaya nga sinasabi ko na posibleng nako-corrupt yung field workers, no? By a very moneyed candidate, no? Who can do it, who sees that if you create a bandwagon early enough, the perception will be panalo na sila. And I dispute that.
Last question. Please.
So, pardon me, I just have to ask this question. So having said that, don't you just give more credence to this Tangere survey just because it favors your candidate?
It's not that we're giving it more credence because it favors our candidate. It's not that. It's because the conditions of the political environment that we are in right now, coming fresh from a pandemic, as well as reports reaching us na nako-corrupt nga yung numerators, sa field, no? Tend to show na parang kinokondisyon nga yung mind ng tao na wala nang eleksyon, tapos na eleksyon, panalo na si Ferdinand Marcos Jr. By an early bandwagon, which we dispute nga. And which this survey shows na kaya pa. And if you will look at the previous surveys, the pre-filing of certificates of candidacy, tingnan niyo yung mga October, September surveys, hindi ba noon nauuna si Sara? At nagna-number 2, in some surveys, number 2 si Isko, number 3 si Bongbong, or gano'n, no? Pero nakita nyo na nung pumasok si Sara, that's why it was very, very important for Ferdinand Marcos Jr. to inveigle Mayor Inday Sara to be his vice presidential candidate. Kasi yung Mindanao nag-swing, no? Admittedly, Mindanao is Duterte territory, and parts of Visayas. So nag-swing talaga yung kay Marcos. Whereas before, if you look at the surveys prior to the matchup, mababa si Ferdinand Marcos Jr. sa Mindanao. Talagang yung pagkakakuha niya o pagkakapagpapayag niya kay Mayor Inday Sara ang nagbigay sa kanya ng Mindanao. And that is seen in all the surveys.
And when you mentioned a while ago, sir, that somehow in the Pulse Asia survey, since it is being subcontracted, somehow some questions are being skewed to favor certain candidates. How sure are you that in this particular survey in Tangere, questions are not skewed at all to influence the respondents to favor a certain candidate as well?
Kasi this is not done on a face-to-face basis. This is online. No? So quick answers. It's the horse race and question, just a few questions and that's it. So that's the reason why the numbers may have been quite different.
And one last clarification, sir. As compared to Tangere, where the results show that the second preferred candidate is really Yorme or Mayor Isko Moreno, as compared to the polls, medyo malayo pang third po. No? Ang second preference is Lenny. How do we, or at least
Even in Pulse, a second choice is always Isko.
Right.
From all surveys, all companies, second choice si Isko. Ibig sabihin, kung for one reason or not, hindi tumakbo, hindi natuloy yung pagtakbo ng first choice mo, ang second choice mo si Isko. Or, for one reason, halimbawa, nagpalit ka ng isip, no? I mean, through the dynamics of the campaign, nagpalit ka ng isip, pag nagpalit ka ng isip, si Isko ang magiging second choice mo, imbis na ibang kandidato. That's what the second choice preference means.
Thank you, sir.
No more question? Thank you very much. Meron tayong lunch dyan sa media center.
Si Ernest siguro.
Yeah, I think kasi sinasabi nga niya that before they did represent the Marcos estate on this matter. But however, since at that time Mrs. Araneta used to work for their term, so parang na-handle niya. But afterwards, wala na sa kanila, wala na siyang direct knowledge about the case. So he's saying that he cannot give an opinion or any comment about it since he did not follow the case anymore. About the 203. Sa akin, again, probably she hasn't received it yet. She hasn't seen the paper or the demand letter yet. But it's out there. I mean, the demand letter, as said, as replied by PIR, is already out there. It was sent to them. Now, feigning ignorance or avoiding the issue, and in fact, in the same interview, she said she just labasin na sa bulok na sistema ng pamumulitika. I think that's the real answer right there. Hindi naman sa hindi nila natanggap, but they're just avoiding the issue and make it simply just an issue of politicking, rotten system of politics, as you say. Na, again, ito na yung tack nila all along, all these years, no? Iwas dito, iwas doon, gawa ng storya dito, gawa ng storya doon. So, ito lang yung laro nila. I think they want, siguro ito yung nakikita nila that will win them through. But apparently, as shown by the numbers, around 30% of their own followers are questioning this. May question mark sa kanila na, bayaran mo, bakit magbayad ka? So ito yung mga, I think, nag-iisip at this time. And kung hindi sila gumawa ng action, they might just lose this 33% of their 48%.
It's 14.5 points.
That's 14%, that's huge.
I have another question. Did you see in your data that any evidence showing President Duterte's strategy for the market versus Duterte? Does that fall in?
Posible. Matagal na niya sinabi yun eh. Posible merong effect yun. Hindi tinanong kasi particular question.
And then the rest of the non-part or images of the market voters that remain, market supporters but talk back. Since hindi tumatalab so far yung 203 billion for them, what is your strategy to bring them over to your side?
Well, the 203 billion estate tax is a continuing and a legitimate story. In fact, I didn't know about that, about Secretary Guevara's statement. I didn't know that earlier. Secretary Guevara's statement na ni-represent ng kanyang law firm dati the estate of Ferdinand Marcos. Puts another kink into this story. Diba? Kasi, in fairness to Secretary Guevara, he came out with that statement, no? But he is the Secretary of Justice now. So, syempre, magkakaroon na naman ng permutations yan. Until and unless they settle this tax liability squarely, no? And even Secretary Dominguez is saying that it should be settled, no? Whether by garnishment of properties or by cash payments or whatever other means, no? The people will not be satisfied with whatever explanations they make. Kasi alam naman ng lahat ng tao even if they have forgiven Ferdinand Marcos Sr. and his family, alam naman ng lahat ng tao, wala naman nagpo-question na talagang grabe ang corruption during the martial law period. No, I think nobody will say that they were saints. Nakapako naman sa isip ng tao yun.
In relation to the 203 billion issue, just like to, again, kasi the Marcos camp has been using these two headlines from the Manila Times. Manila Times say, a banner headline of theirs last Monday, tax experts clear BBM. And then, there's a Manila Bulletin reporter here. Another banner headline, Manila Bulletin, almost on the same day, okay, heirs not liable for 203 billion estate tax, BIR. When you read the news, these are both misleading headlines. Kasi pag binasa mo, wala naman nag-quote directly. It was done in anonymity. Wala man na nagsabi, I'm BIR director, so-and-so, and I'm saying this is the law. Pag binasa mo, malinaw doon na, I don't know why the headlines were shown that way. But in fact, the tax code, the 1997 tax code, still, sinasabi na ang liability is to the executor and the indirect sa mga heirs. Hindi mo pwede gawin liable yung estate. Hindi naman tao yung estate. How could you make an estate properties liable? It is the executor, it is the administrator, or the executor and heirs themselves that are liable. And that's clear in Section 91 and Section 92 of the Tax Code of 1997. So, itong ginagamit ng mga Marcos, again, this is propaganda of theirs. And pumunta ka sa page nila, nilalabas nga ito, itong mga misleading headlines na ito. And then they also continue to use the Divisoria issue against Mayor Isko, where we made it clear already that, number one, Mayor Isko did not sell the whole Divisoria as being peddled all over social media. Mayor Isko sold an underperforming asset in the Divisoria Mall, and as recommended by one of the departments in the assets management group of City Hall. So, and then, may allegations that now it's the money being used for the campaign. No. Malinaw po, ginamit po ito sa Best-Selling Community. Ginamit po yung pondo para pang ayuda sa mga Manileño. That's where the money went. Simple. Sana po, yung iba na nagpe-peddle ng mga gantong irresponsible news should check their sources as well. Thank you.
Sir, yung sinasabi na kasi ng Supreme Court, yung request nyo na kumuha ng copy, nakakuha na ba kayo? Then, kasi laging deny ng mga Marcos na wala silang copy na natatanggap.
I think it's already out in the media, yung entry of judgment. It was entered into Supreme Court's judgment, book of judgment, last 1999, 2 years after the final and unappealable ruling was made. So andyan yun, lumabas na po yan sa media. That's already with the Supreme Court's book of entry of judgment. Clearly saying, may utang sila. Magbayad na sila. Buwis ng bayan para sa mga bayan.
Thank you. Tatay Power.
Hard cabinet. Hard cabinet.
Ikaw Pare, nakahawak ng tarpaulin na gano'n na.
Kita ko.
Ayaw na nila, ayaw mo na, marami na
Oh. Tapos na, no? Baka may something ano pa eh.